So our next speaker is Joseph Bellino. He's the System Executive, Security and Law Enforcement for the Memorial Hermann Healthcare System, in Houston, Texas. Prior to joining Memorial, he served in numerous safety and security positions in health organizations across the country. And I really do mean across the country, Joe.
Yes.
And currently, he's a member of several Homeland Security and Health and Human Services committees, and is co-chair of the Joint Advisory Working Group on Healthcare Security. We welcome Joe with his presentation, tying it all together, preparing, responding, and recovering, and then we'll bring Christian up afterwards as well and let you both answer some questions. So Joe, welcome, come on up.
Thank you. I'm going to have a little bit of a hard time. First of all, I don't talk Texan, right? Did you get that? I'm an East Coaster, but I was born in Oklahoma. I was a military brat, so I came from the South, then went to the East, and now I'm back to the South where I hope to retire. But I'll give you a lesson on Texan. Everybody know the difference between y'all and all y'all? Yeah. Yeah, what is it? All y'all are here today, not y'all. Y'all is singular, all y'all is plural. So when you go to Texas, you address a group, it's y'all have a good day today, okay? All right. The other thing I want to say is that you'll see two signs up there, CPPS and Memorial Hermann. I'm representing Memorial Hermann today through CPPS, who started the partnership. I am an uncompensated consultant, senior advisor, whatever you want to call me, for CPPS. The material, though, was developed by myself and others at CPPS today. And this is actually out of an 8-hour program that some of you have already seen, because a couple of years ago I was here and I noticed some of you. So I just want to make sure I'm very upfront about that. So instead of recreating the wheel, we took readiness, response, and recovery, and then at the end you'll see where I've put a lot of other slides in there, and I want to talk to you about my experiences. A lot of people call me an expert. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. The day I'm an expert is the day I retire and go to the ranch. What I am as a person has been very blessed in my life to experience a lot of things. I've been a police officer. I've been a special agent. I've been a canine handler. I've also been a fireman. So that's right, for my law enforcement buddies out there, we make fun of those hose pullers. Well, now I'm a volunteer hose puller. And I learned a lot. So I've been one of those people. My father told me, never turn down any opportunity for education and training. And one thing I will tell you, and I've not said this in public ever before, I am a survivor and active shooter from a law enforcement side. That's why I do what I do. I do this because it's so important in healthcare, because we do bury our heads in the sand with violence. You know, over the years when I first came into this 20 years ago, how many nurses do I have in here? When you were trained, were you not told that verbal abuse and being smacked was part of the job? It's not part of the job. Matter of fact, I'm happy to report today that yesterday we passed legislation in the Texas House that now makes it an aggravated assault to touch a nurse. So we're making strides, and I worked with my friends at ENA in Texas, and the governor hopefully will sign that legislation on Sunday. That should be universal. It was kind of odd. If you're a security officer in Texas, automatic aggravated assault if you assault a security officer in the hospital, but a nurse it wasn't. So next week we hope that legislation gets signed. So let me get this little thing here and we'll get started. I want to make this interactive. I'll move as fast as I can. I'm told I talk too fast, but hopefully I'm in a crowd that understands East Coast English. Okay. All right, it's a cultural thing. This is me. And again, thank you for the opportunity of being here today. So you saw this earlier today. We're very unique. I will submit to you that, we have we're a city within a city. We operate 24 hours a day, but we can't lock our doors. So from a security perspective, that's a nightmare for me. And again, we talk about patient-centered care. We want everybody to stay all night long and help us with our patients. Is there any other business in the world that allows their families and friends and extended families to come and stay with you in the office all day, all night, if you're an overnight worker, overshift worker? We are extremely diverse. We have ambulatory, non-ambulatory. And when you talk about your plans, and let's talk about active shooter being the most extreme case of workplace violence, right? How many people here have a very diverse healthcare organization? Probably all of us, right? We got outpatient, inpatient, we have psychiatric, all that. So when you develop your plans, is one plan going to work at all? No. Do you have a framework plan that everybody can adopt to? Yes. And that should be your workplace violence plan. We'll talk more about that. The other thing that's important that I want to share with you, I get calls from people, and they say, Joe, I'm so-and-so, I work in this children's hospital, and I'm starting this whole thing about workplace violence and active shooter, and I went to talk to my nursing team, and I've talked to the nurses, and basically they told me they're going to run. I said, okay, let's talk about this. What do you mean they're going to run? He said, they're going to run. If we get an active shooter in our building, they're going to run. How many people have a problem with that? Is that a moral or ethical issue that we can answer? Can I tell my staff that you cannot run, that you have a legal duty, obligation to protect your patients? Can you? How do you know? I know what I'm going to do. Okay, and we'll talk about that. What they have is a problem with education. They haven't trained their staff that there are options to the worst case of workplace violence, which is the active shooter. There are things you can do to mitigate the loss of life. Does anybody argue with me? And this is a hard statement I'm going to make, and this really upsets people. People are going to die. How do we know we have an active shooter in our building? When the first person is shot. Like Ryan said this morning, it brought back a lot of memories. Brought back a lot of memories from the law enforcement side of things. Because what do we want to do in law enforcement? We want to save lives, right? That's why we get into it. What do we want to do in nursing and healthcare and physicians? What do we want to do? Save lives, right? Get people better, fix them up, get them home so we can get that outpatient revenue, right? Home health, all that stuff, right? Right? We get it. We get it. All right. So again, and we're very prescriptive. When we started writing our policy 2.5 years ago, people want you to write all the solutions down. With workplace violence, you can't write all the solutions down. With an active shooter plan or extreme violence workplace plan, you can't write all the answers. You're going to give a framework, and you're going to give people education so they can work off that framework and give them the knowledge. And as a young police officer sergeant told me one time, Joe, the only way you're going to survive in law enforcement is to modify, adapt, and overcome. And that's what we're teaching our staff, to modify, adapt, and overcome as a situation hits them. All right? The other thing we love in healthcare, how many people in here are adrenaline junkies? Come on. We're my ER nurses and ER docs, paramedics. Right. We're all adrenaline junkies, right? Anybody here have a true adrenaline rush? Best high in the world, but you got to learn how to manage it. You have these things. We call it anxiety and stress today. That's what we call it, right? But you got to understand how to manage it. If you don't train people how to respond to it, it's going to be a problem. And that's what we need to do. And then we talk about, in addition to, well, we're short-staffed, we're busy, yada, yada, all these things. And again, who really wants to go to the hospital? I have 5 kids, 3 boys. I have 3 teenage boys, believe it or not. So you think I spend time in the ER from time to time? Yeah, boys are knuckleheads. My girls are great. So I love my kids, but everybody said, boy, you wait, those girls are going to give you heartache. Wrong, boys. All right. Okay. The best thing I can tell you today in workplace violence, if you remember nothing today, the way to prevent and mitigate the loss of life and injury is individual training. You have to do it. You have to do it. We have great policies and procedures in all of our systems because it's mandated by regulation. But we forget to do this. Everyone in this room has to be trained. Everyone below you and above you has to be trained. How many people in here know what race and pass is? Come on, I know there's more than that. Maybe our law enforcement brethren don't, right? Why should it be any different for workplace violence? Why should it be any different? It shouldn't be. Is it just as lethal? Yes, possibly. Is it just as dangerous as a fire in your organization? How many people have ever had a fire in their hospital? I had 16 in 1 year, not at Memorial Hermann, in a former life. 3 by arson. And each one of the cases, my staff, and I'm talking about the hospital because I'm not in charge, I'm responsible for everybody, right, as a security chief. Every one of my staff, nursing, security, housekeeping, performed miraculously, and we lost no lives. And we caught the person eventually, thank God the video technology. So again, why should it be any different from workplace violence? Why should we tolerate this stuff? Well, we shouldn't. We shouldn't. So training. Here's usually the organizational response. We have a grievance. We get some ideation by the individual. There's the path. Then the individual, depending on who they are, will do some research and planning. We know that. Whether it's an assault all the way up to extreme violence. Preparation, we know that our shooters prepare, and then they have the breach and the attack. This is the path, okay? We got to interrupt this path. And that's what I think we can do. When we talk about zero tolerance, let me give you something you can really measure. How about zero incidents? From a quality perspective, EOC perspective, if you put in your plan, we're going to have zero incidents. Can you measure that? Can you work toward that? Sure. Can you work toward zero incidents or zero tolerance? No. Look what happens in our school districts today. A kid walks in with a fake gun. Next thing you know, he's suspended for 3 months. Right? Is that the right thing, the wrong thing? I don't know. I don't want to judge the school systems. So, do we want to do that in healthcare? You know, in Texas, everybody carries a gun. You all know that, right? All y'all know that everybody carries a gun in Texas. All right? We have the carry conceal. But fortunately, and they wrote a really smart law. When they wrote the carry concealed law in Texas, they allowed certain establishments to put what we call the, and I get this, those are your hunters, 30-06 language. 30-06 is a gun, folks. It's a rifle commonly used in hunting. But for some reason, when they wrote the legislature, it's 30-06, 30.06 of the section of the Penal Code. Okay, that joke went real far. But what it does is, boy, you all got to get out of Boston more often, go to Texas. What it allows is, it allows hospitals to post that nobody can bring a gun into our facilities except a law enforcement official. So, do you think that makes us immune from somebody carrying a gun into our facility? Absolutely not. Because what happens in the ER? You get a victim from a car crash. They have a carry concealed weapon. What's going to happen? You're going to have a weapon in your hospital. Do you have policy and procedures for that? Do you have policy and procedures for just even in your hospitals here? What do you do when somebody comes in with a weapon? Are your officers trained? Those types of things. All right. So, again, recognizing the sequence. Prevention, prevention, prevention. I don't care what anybody says. We got to do bottom line, baseline training. So, again, I'm going to go through these faster for you because I want to get to the end and talk about what we can do. Understand the baseline behaviors. What are behaviors? Do you have a code of conduct in your facilities? When I was at Liberty Healthcare, it was so bad that we had to come up with a code of conduct for patients, for visitors, and staff. That was the only way we're going to change our culture. We went from an inner city hospital to a not-for-profit, and I had 11 different unions that nobody could play nice in the sandbox. So we actually set up a code of behaviors. And guess what? We changed our culture. Did it happen overnight? No. I mean, people are really nasty to each other. We did good work. We were a trauma center, level 2. We saved lives and whatnot. But to each other, we were pretty nasty, including our clients, our customers. But that's a bad word too, right? We don't have customers. We have patients. Now, I submit to you we have customers now. The more we ask our people, our patients to pay, the more they're going to be a customer, the more demanding they're going to be. And guess what? They're going to get more vocal. That's what I think is happening. That's my theory about why we're having so much violence in healthcare today, because we have demanding customers. And haven't we encouraged that? Haven't we told them to ask questions? So I think our staffs have to be kind of retrained on that as well, and we're doing that. Understand boundary probing. Does everybody know what boundary probing is? Right? How many people have teenagers? Do they probe your boundaries to the point where you're like, I said no? All right. And then we got to, and don't you think employees do that? Oh, yeah. Okay. I worked in union and non-union environment. Is there a difference? You think there's a difference in behavior? Yeah. But there's similarities, and they love to probe those boundaries, right? Right? So understand what the boundaries are. And the other thing I would submit to you, having a great relationship with HR and risk management to get this through your system is the way to make it happen. Because if you don't have HR as your main player on this workplace violence prevention program, it's not going to work. Because I will tell you, there are case studies where HR, if you're not in a team effort, will actually empower employees and they become emboldened to be more disruptive to the workplace. So that's why we have to work as a team. I've seen that. All right? All right, there you go, pointing the finger. All right, post-intervention evaluation. Make sure when we have these behaviors that we don't disregard. You heard this earlier today. There's no capacity to control his or her actions. When you hear people, I'm so angry, I can't control myself. You think that is that a cry for help? Absolutely. You'll be fine. Go have a beer and go home. And they go home, they kick the dog, they smack the wife, and they have a beer, and then the police come, right? Have we resolved anything? No. Document, document, document. How many times do we get confronted with behavior? You as supervisors, managers, directors, C-team people, you're told about the behavior of a physician, employee, and we just say, they're having a bad day, don't worry about it, it'll go away. Does it go away? It doesn't. Do people have a bad day? Absolutely. Should we give them the support to recover from that bad day? Absolutely. But when people have a bad day, day after day, that's not good. There's my 2% rule. 2% of the American population is miserable from the time they get up to the time they go to bed. Matter of fact, when they're put in the ground, they'll still be complaining because they don't like their casket. All right? There's that. I mean, we know those people, right? They're just miserable. I'm talking about the people that have the real propensity for violence. Okay? All right. Again, the best predictor of future behavior is what? Post-intervention behavior. Right? Where is the best place to stop workplace violence? In any organization, whether it's healthcare, where's the best place? Your selection and recruitment. If you do have a good selection and recruitment process, you should be able to avoid a lot of issues. A lot of issues. How many people here in your organizations where when you hire somebody, you can't even do reference checks anymore? I know several organizations, they are not allowed to do reference checks. The organization has chosen not to do reference checks. Is that good or bad? I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Again, so just considerations. Again, we're very unique and complex. You all know about it. The other thing I asked today when I get out here, whatever happened to the nuclear family? Does anybody even know what a nuclear family is anymore? Yeah, I'll submit to you that ERs, parking lots, med-surg, and women's centers are probably your 4 top most violent areas in a hospital with respect to incidents. Anybody disagree with that? At one hospital I worked, the second place from the ER, the worst place was women's. You have children having children with multiple partners and multiple grandparents. You put that dynamic into an area, and mom or child who's having a child says, I don't want anybody to visit, I don't want them, and she's got her new boyfriend and a new family. Do you have a recipe for disaster? Absolutely. Do you have plans in place to handle that? Do you talk to people about that? Do you talk to them about visitation? No, come on in, we want everybody to come. So these are things. So family dynamics are very strained. The other thing that we're finding a lot of is custodial disputes. We're having a lot of that in Houston as of late with CPS and custody issues. So make sure you have clear plans and procedures in place for that. We recently had a case where we did a transfer, and by the time the story got out, the father had a gun and was coming up to the transfer hospital, to the NICU, to shoot everybody because he was upset. What it was mother was suicidal. He took a gun away from her. So you can see how that story changes. So quickly you have to assess that, and we'll talk about threat assessments here in a minute. Negative medical news, again, this is how do you deliver medical news? Do you train your people how to deliver bad medical news? Do you understand the cultural differences when you deliver bad medical news? What about end of life, living will issues? I'll never forget early on in my career, we got a call of an officer needs assistance call. I've never seen my senior vice president run up so many flights of stairs with me and keep up with me. But when we got there, it was a DNR patient, wasn't communicated. We're in a teaching academic facility, so everybody comes, right, to save this person's life. And the family is saying, no, it's a DNR, no, it's a DNR. When we got up there, bodies were flying out of the rooms back and forth, all right, for simple miscommunication. You know, something that simple, we had a tremendous fight. We wound up arresting several people. Several security officers were hurt. I thought my boss was going to have a heart attack. You know, you just get there. Cultural diversity, sensitivity, drugs and alcohol today, and now let's add a little bit of psychiatric history to that, and we have a nice brew. Stress-filled environment. You guys don't have any problems with psych patients, do you? Nah. No, nobody has problems with psych patients. If anybody ever has an answer or what to do with them, let's get together, we'll write a book because we'll be millionaires, because that's the big operative question. We'll talk about some strategies for that, what we've done, and actually save some money in doing it. So again, having an awareness mindset is critical. Our staff has to understand what workplace violence is. Do you have a culture environment where people can report it safely and comfortably? It's a big culture change. Do you have avenues for people to report it? How many people have a corporate compliance line? Hey, I'm going to save you a lot of money, right? Quick way to set up an anonymous reporting line without creating something new, because we always want to create something new in healthcare. Use your corporate compliance line. I met with the corporate compliance people as soon as I got there because they were starting to get calls. So what we did was we trained the corporate compliance people, because that's phones answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We came up with 2 processes, 1 or 2. And what they heard, 1 requires an immediate response from the system executive to put the threat assessment team, or 2 can wait till the next business day. It's very simple. It's now in our workplace violence policy. If you don't feel comfortable going to security, going to HR, going to your manager or supervisor, you can call the corporate compliance hotline and maintain anonymity. And we've had, believe it or not, we've had people call, and we've been able to open up investigations and then either prove them or disprove them. So again, very cost-effective way to put up a anonymous reporting line and change your culture. Recognition, I believe, one of the things that we're trying to do, and I would hope you do, intervene early and appropriately. We find over and over and over again there were warning signs. There were behaviors of concern. There were things that we could have done. When that happens and you intervene early and appropriately and do the right things, you avert a workplace violence incident. What else do we do when we do that? As Bonnie said earlier, turnover kills us in healthcare, right? It kills us, all right? I would submit to you, you could do a PI project if you came up with a good workplace violence prevention program and tracked it, that you could cut your turnover down, all right, by workplace bullying and all those other things. And there's a definite hard cost if you track it and you can reduce your costs. Because we know we got to get the attention of the CFO anytime we want to put a new program in place. What's the first word out of their mouth? Joe, what's this going to cost me? It's going to, as we say in Italian, it's going to cost you ugats, nothing, right? Nothing, right? Zero. That's what it's going to, and guess what? Okay, and then talk to me. Talk to me. All right, so alert supervisors, action is vital. Again, report so you can track and trend. All right? By the way, nobody's asked me yet. I'm going to ask you. Joe Bellino. Does everybody know who Joe Bellino is from Acton, Massachusetts? Who does? There you go. All-American Heisman Trophy winner, 1959. You should have seen me running down the field in diapers. All right? Okay. So just getting you to lighten up because this is a tough subject. All right. We're going to talk more about threat management. How many people here in your workplace violence prevention programs at your hospitals or systems have an active threat management program? Who's willing to admit they do? Nobody? This is the key ingredient. I find this everywhere I speak around the country. Nobody has a threat management team. Why? If you have a workplace violence plan, why do you not have a threat management team? Do you know you're supposed to have one? Look at your OSHA regs. Okay. Does the police department, I have a lot of police agencies here, do you have a threat management team or threat assessment capabilities? Right, standard operating procedure. Which federal agency has the best threat risk assessment program in the world? Secret Service. Guess where I'm going to share with you where we got the threat management program from. There's a great document. If there's a way, Reagan, I have a document that I can get to that you can share with everybody. It tells you how to set up a threat management, threat assessment team. It's phenomenal. It's free. It's off the internet. And we based our threat management on that. We'll talk about that. Again, it's an integral component of your workplace violence prevention program. Again, intervene early and appropriate, right? So if you have a good threat assessment team. Let me tell you about a real live case scenario. We're rolling out our policy and procedure. When I first got to my organization, we had 27 different workplace violence plans. As a system, we're very immature. We're starting to mold. Matter of fact, we changed our name in January to Memorial Hermann Health System. We don't even say healthcare anymore because we're a broad spectrum provider. Probably no different than any of y'all. And we said, look, we got to do something. And we did. And we came down to one workplace violence policy, and then we have addendums to the workplace violence policy. We call it our extreme violence, which is our active shooter. So we're in this development phase, and we're starting to roll out the policy, and I get a call of an incident. And this is one of my employees. 10 o'clock in the morning, I meet with my team, and this officer at 3 o'clock in the morning was with her significant other and her 2 children in her car. Career felon, by the way. Go figure that. And he pulls a semi-automatic handgun on her in the car and tries to shoot her. She deflects the hand. The rounds go out through the side of the door. She jumps out of the car. He takes off with the babies. So, long story short, police get him, arrest him, whatever, blah, 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 blah. He's in jail. She tells us at 10 o'clock in the morning, 7 hours later, do you think we have a potential threat problem? Sure we do. Because I don't know when he's going to be released on bond. So we put, this was a great opportunity to try this. So myself, my manager of the campus, I have a manager of law enforcement because I have 90 police officers that work part-time for us, the COO of the campus, my 2 HR attorneys, my 2 labor attorneys, and then I brought my risk management attorney, and within 20 minutes, we assessed the threat based on the information, because I had all the right players in there, right? I had accurate information from law enforcement. We already contacted the prosecutor. And 20 minutes, we did our threat assessment. 30 minutes in, we had our plan of protection in place. That's a robust way of doing it. And I'll show you a couple of things how you do it. And basically, you got to take the emotion out of threat assessment, and it's got to be fact-based. What do we know right now? Okay, what can we do to mitigate? And we got this employee into a safe house, put her on administrative leave for 5 days, and worked with the employee, case management. I mean, we started bringing those resources in. You'd be surprised how many resources you have in your hospital to help in these cases. So again, is it perfect? No, just wanted to share it with you. Here are some threat assessment team members that you should have. Management, administration, security, human resources, risk management, legal counsel, employee assistance, mental health, union reps. I know that's big up here. Not everybody in the union is a bad person. Find those champions. I mean, I've been able to work on both sides of the house. I've had negative unions and positive union relationships. Find those people that are willing to work with you, that really care about the employees, and then ad hoc members as necessary. And by the way, don't forget the people in the billing office. They probably get more verbal threats than any employee in the organization, because who's handling the complaints when a patient feels that we overcharged them or screwed up their care and now we're billing them for it? Do you have security procedures in place for your billing office? I'll submit to you that it's probably one of the most overlooked areas. We constantly talk about the inpatient areas. Don't forget about your outpatient services. So it's a structured group to process used to evaluate the risk posed by a person or persons, typically as a response to an actual or perceived threat or concerning behavior. That's the definition. And it's conducted on individuals whose behavior or behaviors cause concern about the safety of staff, patient, or visitors. We're talking about behavior-based, right? As Bonnie said earlier, and some of the other people, we don't profile anybody. But we can look at behavior, and we call them behaviors of concern. And we can go through all types of behaviors of concern, all right? That would take a whole day. How do you do the assessment? Again, I want to be very clear. It's an analysis of the subject's behavior, an examination of patterns of conduct that may result in an act of workplace violence. It's kind of like the questions that Bonnie put up about veiled threats as opposed to specific threats. The level of threat posed by a given subject at a given time becomes a central concern. And I can see the wheels are spinning here now with y'all. The threat assessment approach is a fact-based method of evaluation that has been developed, refined, and used by the U.S. Secret Service. Earlier today, we talked about going postal, right? Who do you think has one of the best workplace violence prevention programs in the country? U.S. Postal Service. By the way, if you go on their website, it's free. You can look at it. When you think about those of us that lived through the 80s, how many postal center employee shootings did we have in the early 1980s? It was at epidemic proportion. My shooting was in 1982, and in that year, we had the one in our town. We had the one at the Luby's cafeteria. You all remember the guy that drove through the Luby's cafeteria? Those of you who are old enough. There's some people here I keep forgetting that may not be old enough. Drove the truck into Luby's and started shooting everybody. And then we had the postal centers, and we had manufacturing centers. It was like it just took off. And we've been having active shooters since what? The UT incident, right? In the 1960s. The guy in the tower. So I saw a report the other day that they've gone back now. There's over 244. I know John Hopkins said 135, but I looked at another study. There's over 244 healthcare shootings. When I started doing the research 3 years ago, I can only find 44. So we've come a long way in just a very short period of time. All right, so here are your questions. And I won't go through all of them, but they're on the slides. I know the slides will be made available to you. There's 10 questions when you do a threat assessment. Just 10 questions. What motivated the subject to make the statements or threat? What has the subject communicated to anyone concerning his or her intentions? Has the subject shown interest in targeted violence? Perpetrators of targeted violence, weapons, extremist groups, murder? Has the subject engaged in attack-related behavior, including any menacing, harassing, stalking type behavior? Okay. Does the subject have a history of mental illness? Bingo. All right. We don't have a profile of an active shooter in this country, correct? But I will tell you there are characteristics. White male, Young, history of mental illness. Now, some of us would probably laugh and say, geez, that's about half my family fits that character, right? Right? But we're getting there. We're getting there, all right? There's just haven't been enough, and unfortunately, I was talking to Ryan earlier today. I would love to sit down and interview Mr. Holmes and Mr. Loeffner. I wish I could get that opportunity after their cases, because I think there's a lot we can learn from them about their psyche and what they did. I mean, you look at their pictures. You're not supposed to stereotype, right? But have you ever looked at Jared Loeffner's and Mr. Holmes' pictures, their mugshots? You think those people got some problems? Absolutely. Now, do we know about those problems? Absolutely. What other commonalities do those two guys have? Problems in school, at college. Cho, right? Cho was a problem. What was the excuse in the Virginia Tech case why we didn't share information? HIPAA concerns. Are there provisions in HIPAA where we can share information with law enforcement? Absolutely. You just got to know how to do it and do it right. So please remove those barriers, and by having that threat management team and having the right people and getting the right sources and the right contacts and pulling that information, you can do that. So mental illness, hallucinations, delusional, feelings of persecution. Look for people who are injustice collectors, especially in the workplace. You know, injustice collectors. You know what I'm talking about when I talk about an injustice collector? Not my fault. It's my dirty, rotten boss. He's picking on me again. I'm going to get that SOB. He's going to pay. He's going to pay for the time he suspended me 5 times. And by the way, it happened 10 years ago, and now you're bringing it back. These people never let anything go. They just carry those injustices around with them their whole life, and then they have a precipitating event, and they act on those injustices. Okay. How organized is the subject? Are they capable of carrying out the threat? Very, very important question. Are they capable of carrying out their plan? Have they experienced a recent loss or a loss of status? Has this led to the feelings of desperation and despair? You think if you fire somebody in this economy, that's not going to be an issue for them? If they have, say they're the sole provider, you have 5 children or 6 children at home, maybe a sick wife, maybe children with special needs. How many here have proper termination procedures? You probably don't know what I'm talking about, right? Do you have policies and procedures that govern how you terminate people? You should. Do you terminate everybody on a Friday afternoon? There's businesses out there that terminate people on a Friday. Now, why would you do that? Give them all weekend to stew with no resources so that Monday they can come and create a problem? Like Ryan said, terminating somebody from a holiday, before a holiday. Do you want to do that? Layoffs. In the one case study, there was a layoff at a health system in California, and the survivor. There was a survivor in the pharmacy. He was struggling with the fact that he was a survivor to the point when am I next? And it became overwhelming for him. And he went in one night, shot both his supervisors and then himself. Did we miss something there? Absolutely. You got to open up the box. You got to get out there and find out, what are we going to do? I've been a part of a couple of layoffs. We do a threat assessment on every employee that we think is a problem. I'll go to HR and say, okay, who do you think your problem employees are? And they'll give me a list. And we start looking at it. We do a threat assessment on each employee. And then we verify, on my threat assessment team, we have law enforcement. When I was at the smaller community, the chief would come, and it was very, very helpful because they have a lot of information, and they'll share it with you. So you can really do a good threat assessment on people. Do they really have the capabilities? Oh, yeah, we've been to Joe's house 10 times. You ought to see the arsenal in his house. Matter of fact, we've had to take his guns away a couple times because of domestic violence, and he keeps convincing the judge to give him back his constitutional rights. Do you guys have that type of stuff? Absolutely. Absolutely. And then corroboration of the information. Very, very important that we corroborate the information. All right? Is the subject saying, is it consistent with his or her actions? All right. Is there a concern among those that know the subject that he, she might take action based on inappropriate ideas? And then what factors in the subject's life or environment may decrease the likelihood of the subject attempting to attack a target? Going back to that threat assessment I told you we did with my employee, we were able to keep him, by working with the assistant district attorney for 5 days, we were able to keep him in jail on a no bail basis. There was some dispute about his prior criminal record and a felon being in possession of a firearm. And oh, by the way, she bought him the guns. So, you talk about a complex problem. And we all see it, right? It's a typical domestic violence type situation. How many times does it take a woman to be abused before she leaves an abuser? 7 times, if they survive. Going back to what Bonnie said, and I say it all the time, 80% of our employees are female. That means 1/3 of them coming in at any given time are victims. Let's not worry about, we got to worry about the outsiders coming in, but what about our own staff? Do you have a good system in place for people? Do you have that level? How many times those are security professionals in a room and police officers, how many times we respond to a location and they didn't even tell us they had a restraining order, or protect them from abuse order, or whatever it was. And we're like, why didn't you tell us? Well, I'm embarrassed. It's horrible. I don't want people to know I have problems. We've got a culture change there. We've got to establish some confidentiality. All right? So these are the actions to avert workplace violence. It applies to all employees. Do you all know what I mean by that, right? Talking about physicians, right? You've all heard the horror stories about physicians. I've been part of those investigations. All right? Talks about nursing, clinical, non-clinical, dietary. It's the whole spectrum. Nobody is immune from this. All right. By doing this, we foster a climate of trust and respect. You know why? Because now we're engaging people. We always talk about in healthcare, multidisciplinary, right? Is this a multidisciplinary proactive team? Absolutely. Absolutely. Should you communicate what you do? Absolutely. Do you keep a high degree of confidentiality? Absolutely. All right? Because we gossip too much in healthcare. That drives me crazy when I'm trying to do investigations. How many HR people in here? All right. Is that our toughest battle? Because we want to tell people and want to discuss it, because it's a very, HR tends to be, I have my master's in HR, so we're very collaborative, right? And everybody wants to help, but that's probably sometimes an impediment to confidentiality. We got to be careful. So as the HR leader, that's your job, to make sure that the minimal amount of people know and that we keep it extremely confidential. Because once we lose that confidentiality, our employees going to come talk to us? No. They have to have absolute confidence. All right? One of the things that we have to do is recurring training. How many people require mandate workplace violence training annually? Bingo. OSHA's going to come visit you. Because what does OSHA say? Any safety people here? Where are my safety people? What does OSHA say? Workplace violence has to be, this is just briefly, endorsed by senior leadership, and there must be ongoing training. Oh, and by the way, have you done a risk assessment for workplace violence? How many people here have done a risk assessment for workplace violence? Very good. You get the gold star. Usually nobody raises their hand. You know you have to do a risk assessment for workplace violence? How many people here have been investigated by OSHA? 7 visits in 1 year. 7 visits in 1 year in a highly unionized environment, because union doesn't call a safety officer, they call OSHA, right? But we got such a good relationship with OSHA in the District of New Jersey that we actually were cited as a best practice for workplace violence. All right, we had a brand new psychiatric ER built, and the staff didn't like it, so they called OSHA, and we ran a drill, unannounced drill, and we blew OSHA away, and they put us in for a citation commendation because we had a robust workplace violence plan. So we not only talked the talk, we walked the walk and proved it. And we did a risk assessment, and we did put in the electronics. We put a man trap in. We put gun lockers in. We put in Lexan instead of glass. We put in surveillance equipment that only the staff had access to, and it was recorded there and not in security. There's a lot of things you can do to do that. All right, so you got to do the training and make sure you do that. It's got to be annual. How many people here have done active shooter training? Extreme workplace violence. Excellent. Do you have it set up so you do it annually? Yeah, us too. We just started. I have it in our learning management system. We call it PIL, believe it or not, Partners in Learning. And what I have to do now is I have to go before the President's Council with my chief, and we're going to make that presentation because all the presidents of all the 13 hospitals have to approve it, and we think I don't think it's going to be a problem at all. And we'll talk about that, how you sell your program. All right, so incident management response, I'm not going to go into that. Chris did a real good job about tying in, and so did Bonnie, about HICS and incident command and NIMS, and you all don't want to hear any more of that. And by the way, you can get all this free training. There's another free site. Just go to FEMA, and you can take all the training you want for free. All right, we talked about risk assessment, and obviously only 1 or 2 people have done it. You've got to conduct a risk assessment for workplace violence, and that goes into physical environment, external threats, infrastructure. Again, I highly recommend as part of your threat assessment team, your threat management team, that you have a member of law enforcement. It starts building that bridge. When you have a workplace violence incident or active shooter, it's not good when that happens and it's the first time you're meeting local law enforcement for the first time. You can't do that. The first time you have a fire and the chief walks in, that's not a good time to know the chief of the fire department or the responding captain, lieutenant, whatever you have. We have district captains in Houston, so I make sure I meet the district captains because the chief is a very busy man. So we work with the local districts, and therefore it's more personable and more hands-on. By the way, your assessment that you did, hopefully it's up to date. It has to be, once you do it, it's easy, folks, because then you have the document, and then all you got to do is update it. Your security people know how to do risk assessments, security assessments for sensitive areas. They can help you. There's a lot of tools out there. If anybody needs anything, email me. I share everything I have for free. I don't charge for anything. Make sure that when you find a gap, and when you, not only in the physical environment, in your policies and procedures, that once you identify the gaps, you say, okay, that's nice, and move on. No. Make sure you fill that gap, all right? And institute the changes. Communications. I get a lot of calls about, I'm not a big fan of mass communications because you know most active shooters are over in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 2 attempted kills every 30 seconds. That means in 3 minutes, how many people can be dead? 2 every 30 seconds. 4 a minute, right? Right? That's 12 people. And that's an actual formula based on all the active shooter events across the country we've had to date. So is mass notification going to help you in 3 minutes? So you know what we do? And it was one of the most controversial things we did. Code green, active shooter, 3 west. Clear voice, right overhead. So I'm one of those people. I know Chris and I can talk all day. I don't believe in codes because you know what people do? My law enforcement brethren, when we're on the street, right? I need a 1018, 1086, 1024. We all know what that means, right? But if I get on the radio and say I need help right now because I'm getting my you-know-what kicked, do you get a better response? Yeah, it's pretty clear. Because you can tell by the tone and inflection of my voice that I'm in trouble. When I don't listen to the radio anymore, but when I was a director hands-on, I used to listen to the radio. I could tell when my people were in trouble just by the tone and inflection of their voice. Keep it simple, folks. We don't have time for this. Another case. There's a college, it was in Maryland, and guess who was responsible in the event of a workplace violence, extreme violence situation, active shooter? Guess who was responsible for alerting the mass notification so all the kids and moms and dads at home could get the alert over their telephones and pagers? The local campus security force. So guess what happened? They had an event, and they did what they were trained to do. They did the alert before they went to the scene. You think there was a lawsuit over that deal? Oh, you betcha. Anybody know what Virginia Tech has cost so far to date? Anybody want to know what it's cost them so far to date? It's in excess of $100 million. So is there a cost-benefit analysis to having a good, vibrant workplace violence prevention program in place? Absolutely. There's another study out there. Businesses that have good policies and procedures, when an event happens, your business will drop about 15%. Okay? This is a study. It was done right out, I think, by Harvard, right here somewhere in the Boston area. And when you go through recovery, and we talk about recovery, right? Those companies that actually had a good organized plan and implemented their plan and followed it actually saw a 15% increase in business a year later. Guess where the companies were that had no plans at all? Still operating about 7 to 10% deficit. So is there a cost-benefit analysis to doing this? Absolutely. So again, we can talk about mass notification, all that. Mass notification for me is good for after the fact. When you're getting ready to put your A and B teams together, we call it A and B teams. People on site are the A team, B team is going to be a relief team coming in, and you send those messages out. And that works, for us it works well, especially during hurricane season. By the way, you guys have more hurricanes than I had in the past 3 years. So put a spin on global warming and knock yourself out. I don't get it. And it's funny, ever since I left Pennsylvania, there's been more hurricanes on the East Coast than it's hit Houston. I don't know, maybe that black cloud stayed up here. All right, again, what about evacuation plans? Are you going to use normal evacuation plans when you communicate? You got to think about these things. Rallying points, When you go to, we set up rally points at all of our outpatient business units. We call them our retail division. All of our retail outlets, we have 175. You know, you leave the building on a fire alarm and go to the trash can, huddle up, and somebody will take notes, right? Do you want that in a workplace violence incident? No. No. So you're going to change up your plans. You don't want people going to normal rally points. What about your notification procedures? I agree with Chris. Any employee at any time should be able to activate your emergency plan, whatever it is, your policy procedure for workplace violence all the way up to extreme violence. Let me ask you another question. I had a great conversation with one of my CEO champions, and he's been phenomenal and helped me get my program off the ground. He said to me, Joe, what do we do about a guy with a machete that comes to my ER? I said, same thing. Same thing. What's the difference between a guy with a machete and a gun? Anybody want to? What's the difference? Lethality, right? Lethality. Quicker with a gun, but I don't know about you, all my murders that I investigated as a young officer were stabbings. The people that got shot seemed to survive, other than the headshots, which were usually suicides. But as a young officer, most of my gunshot victims survived. The guys that got stabbed, they usually didn't make it. So is there any difference? So you see how fluid your plan can be? Don't get so fixated on just active shooter. Your active shooter plan can work for a multitude of events. The guy with the machete. The knucklehead at Lone Star College, right? You all heard about Lone Star College in Houston a few weeks ago? The student that went around and started stabbing 14 other students, right? Thank God nobody died, all right? But the action of one student who said, this has got to stop, tackled him, and then the police got there. And by the way, the response time was about less than 3 minutes because they have campus police. He was just moving so fast. So a student tackled him, held him to the ground, police got there. Somebody did something. They took the option of what? Takeout, right? So these are all these. And by the way, that's a real hard concept for your risk managers to understand. Where are my risk managers? None? None they'll admit because you don't want to fight. There you are. Okay. So we're going to fight about the fight language. I can tell you that right now. In some of the training, they talk about educating staff how to fight. Do we do that in healthcare? Do we want to fight? Absolutely not. But you know what? If somebody's got a gun in your face and that's the only option you have, are you just going to stand there or are you going to fight for your life? I know what I'm going to do. But I want to be able to train people so they have options and they can exercise those options. Response procedures. We talked about, I wanted to ask Ryan, I didn't talk to him. I know he said he started cleaning up his hospital and whatnot. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. In your plans, do you expect your housekeeping people to clean up that crime scene when the police release it? I hope to God not. Because what happens if housekeepers were killed? What happens if nurses were killed? What happens if my best friend was killed? You're going to ask me to go in there and clean up that mess? Nope. You're going to subject your staff to that psychological trauma? No. Again, start thinking about these things. Is your staff ready? Let's say you're the only trauma hospital in town, the game in town, whatever. And now the shooter is injured. Are you prepared to have your staff treat the shooter or the guy with the knife, the machete, alongside your fallen brethren? Have you talked about that? Do you have agreements in place that maybe we take them across the street? And EMTALA goes out the window at that point? We got to talk about these moral and ethical issues. All right? Me personally, if I got a choice to do CPR on the guy there and one of my brethren, I know what I'm going to do, right? Are you ready for that moral and ethical dilemma? It's like doing triage. Okay. Security personnel. I heard a lot today about, and I'm very familiar with Boston. I've been up here very many times. You guys have a great city, and thank you for being so welcoming. You have a lot of unarmed police departments in healthcare, correct? And they have police authority. I have armed security, unarmed security, and police officers. All right? When I first went to Texas, I never thought I would have an armed security force ever in my lifetime. I was so anti-gun, and then you get indoctrinated into the Texas way of life, and things are a lot different in Texas. So I did a gap analysis, and we looked at it, and we said, we have a real issue here with my guys, when I got there, my men and women, carried a .38 revolver with solid lead round nose bullets, right? And those of you who know about ballistics, those are the type of bullets that go through walls very easily. And they carried 5 rounds in a revolver with no round behind the hammer, with no safety holsters. So you think I got a problem when I walk in the door? Absolutely. Now we have the strictest, most toughest standards for carrying a weapon in our facilities. We carry 40 caliber semi-automatic handguns. We pick the handguns. They're only allowed to carry 4, and they carry Glaser safety ammunition. All right. Now, Glaser safety ammunition may or may not work in Boston in the winter, but in Houston, Texas, Glaser safety ammunition is good all year round. By the way, we make our officers qualify twice a year. They carry triple threat safety retention holsters. When we ran our active shooter drill, the chief of police that was at this small town where we ran our drill tried to remove the simulation weapon from our security officer and could not do it. And I was like, yeah, okay, something works, good. So we had to stop play. The officer had to release the weapon and hand it to the chief, who was the bad guy, the deputy chief, and then we went in play again. And it had soap bullets in it. We don't use paintball. By the way, don't use paintballs. Paintballs are a mess to clean up. Use the soap balls. You don't destroy police uniforms. You don't destroy walls, and your facilities people will love you from the lack of damage. So again, having armed versus unarmed. And by the way, our qualification scores are 88 or better. If you don't score an 88, you don't carry a weapon. And the other thing, it's not in our job descriptions. You know why? Because it's a privilege to carry a weapon, and I have the ultimate authority to pull a weapon from an officer at any time, and I did so 2 weeks ago at the range. I had 2 people acting in unsafe condition. They don't carry for me anymore, for us. We're very, very strict. And guess what? Our scores from the employees are absolutely fantastic. They're fantastic. And people ask me, why do you use weapons? I will tell you, my own personal opinion, there is a perception in my environment that an armed security officer is as well trained and just slightly subordinate to law enforcement. Now, that's a false perception. Our people go through extensive training, but we don't go through the 6 months to a year that a police officer does. But if people believe that and it makes the place safer, I guess I'm okay with that. The other thing I will tell you is that our security officers are not trained. We have not started the training for active shooter response. They will accompany law enforcement under the proper conditions. We've set up with our law enforcement response teams that my officers will follow behind and be a guide. But we have ballistic equipment for them, and we work side by side, and we've only done that at 1 hospital thus far. So we have to build that credibility with law enforcement that we're not rent-a-cops, that we are a professional organization. We're slowly working there. It's taken 3 years to get to this point, and I'm still not done yet. So and that being said, don't put so much pressure on you that it has to be done today. It doesn't have to be done today. Do it right and get the buy-in. The other thing I want to tell you, build boxes. I love boxes. I'm a former emergency manager. Here's the incident command box. Here you go, chief. Knock yourself out. Everything they need is in that box. Have an active shooter box. In that box should be up-to-date floor plans. How many people here build and rebuild in healthcare? Make sure you put update the drawings. Put the master key in there. The master key is usually a card or a key fob. Put all that stuff in there. Because you know what's going to happen? If the active shooter's at 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 in the morning, where it happened in not too long ago at St. Vincent's, you want to be able to have that box. You can't be calling people in. Have everything in the box. Hand it out. Or like Ryan said, if you have a small police department, where I came from Hanover, there was 2 responding agencies. Every one of them had a key fob to my building, and every paid firefighter had a key fob. Again, access is going to be key. Because, right, what do we say, 3 minutes? Do you want to delay that law enforcement response? Absolutely not. Then that brings up another question. Do you want to go lockdown on an active shooter? Have you thought about that? How many people you automatically lock down your facility? I would submit to you it's lock out, not lock down, because you can always get out. You can always get out, so it's lock out. Do you want to do a lockout procedure? Have you asked yourself those questions? These are things that you have to talk about, that we talked about in our. And then again, what about medical response teams? Is your staff capable of rendering immediate first aid the way paramedics and EMTs are? All right, there's a little bit of difference between medics and nursing. I went to a recent seminar in Ohio, and Ohio is changing where instead of EMS holding back, they're now responding in concert with law enforcement or part of the law enforcement entry team. And their job is, number one, take care of law enforcement, but as law enforcement advances, stay behind and take care of the victims. So they're advancing this whole new model. So this is evolving and changing. Most places, EMS will stay down the street until to our law enforcement brethren come out and say, it's clear, come on in. All right? All right. EAP, I'm sure everybody has EAP. External, understand what your external partners are, law enforcement, EMS, fire, consultants if you use consultants, security, media, whatever, counselors. Make sure you have critical incident stress debriefers close at hand. Don't wait till the event. I have signed contracts with security companies and others so that all I got to do is make a phone call. And I'm going to pay for it, but all I got to do is make a phone call and have those assets and resources. Don't wait. Have that written down so that when you're not there, people can open up a book and say, here's all the resources, here's all the phone numbers, and this is who I need to call. Staffing, hospitals. One of the things I've noticed in a lot of large-scale disasters recently, all the staff come to the hospital. Don't do that in an active shooter because we don't know. We don't know. It's so dynamic and so diverse, so be very careful about that. Have staging areas. Family support center, you're going to need that because you're going to be overwhelmed. Your switchboard, forget it. It's fried. It's gone. As soon as this hits the media, I'll share another event with you. One of the things Ryan made it really good about monitoring the media. When I'm suggesting to you, you need to manage the media. Where are my media people? All right? Make sure you're part of this plan. All right? And I was in my office when the Palm Bay hospital shooting occurred. I'm in my office, right? I don't know about you guys, but I don't eat bonbons all day and watch the media from my office. I'm working. And I get a call from a reporter. Mr. Bellino, hi, I'm so-and-so. I'm a reporter from the Palm Bay, whatever, media center, paper. There's an active shooter in Palm Bay Hospital. Guy just walked in the building and is shooting everybody up. What does that speak to about security? So I see where this is going. And I will never, ever badmouth another hospital organization with, I believe, taking the higher road and working with organizations. And I have. And I said, well, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're talking about. So let me verify what's going on. And call me back in 20 minutes. So I immediately was able to verify, got with our public information officer and some other people, and we were able to determine. But I was able to determine before her that it was a lone gunman who was a terminated employee that walked through the cafeteria, went into the office and shot himself and committed suicide. It was not an active shooter. It was just somebody who went back and decided to kill themselves at work. And we had that conversation. She was looking for a negative story to badmouth the hospital, and I wasn't going to do that. And needless to say, after she interviewed me for 30 minutes, it was not published because I wasn't going to give her a story. And I'm okay with that. Very, very important, manage the media. Manage the media. Don't let them manage you. It's kind of like a disaster, right? What do we want to do? Get out front and manage it? Don't let it manage us? Well, let me tell you, the media is a disaster. Hopkins, media came in immediately. What'd they do? Block their ingress and egress from the campuses. They have those huge trucks, right? My colleague in Blacksburg, Virginia, at the hospital had one victim, I believe, that was kind of a long-stay patient. Guess who his biggest security problem was? The media dressing up like us to get into the hospital, try to get the first story. As you all know, we had Gabby Giffords for 5 months, and we protected her for 5 months with 0 HIPAA breaches and 0 security breaches. You know how we did that? Buy into the staff, communicating to the staff, managing the media, working with the family, and doing a coordinated effort to get information out. That's how we did it. And we're not perfect at it. We just did a good job in doing it. And at one point, there was a bounty for her picture, and it was a lot of money. And I was more worried about a picture sneaking out. Just think, right? I don't have my cell phone. It's in the back. But what does everybody's cell phone have now? It's probably better megapixel technology than your camera at home, right? So we didn't have any of that. So again, communication. I can't tell you enough. Ryan was so on target with most of his things that he was saying today. All right. Training and education. You can't do it enough. So let me give you another cost-benefit analysis. I have 13 acute care hospitals and 175 locations in the greater Houston area. I go all the way to Wharton, Texas, which is probably an hour south of Houston. And we go down. We have another big medical practice of a couple hundred physicians and employees south of Galveston. So it's a large area. Probably take anywhere from an hour or two to drive to some of my locations. So that's a lot of people, right? 20 to 30,000 employees, depending on who you talk to. We use the 30,000 employee because you have contractors and vendors and But we have 22,000 actual employees and 8,000 associate-type employees. So how do you train those people? What do? We looked across the system. It's not a lot of money. I get out there with my team, and we market and sell the program. How many security people in here? Okay, great. I'm telling you, we have to do a better job at marketing what we do and selling it. That's what we do. And we do that naturally because we care about what we do, and it comes from our hearts. That's what you have to do. We put a plan in place where it's amazing. You know, we talk about One Memorial Hermann, but everybody's doing it a little bit differently. Like, for instance, we're training every single employee at our 65-bed hospital. It's about 500-600 employees, and every single employee is going through workplace violence training in the classroom for 3.5 hours. My level 1 trauma center, all right? We trained every single manager all the way up to the C-suite. We're training them first in active shooter response. The CEO at that campus gave me 4 hours. Okay? So all he's paying for, all right, he's not paying for me and my team because we do it in teams. All he's paying for is to put those people in a room. We've got our learning management system done, so it takes about 20 to 30 minutes on a computer. Is that ideal? No. I'd rather show the videos. We're working on compression issues with the videos. There's 2 healthcare-specific videos out there that we use, and they're very good for workplace violence active shooter. You can use the Run, Hide, Fight video out of Houston. It's not really, it's a good video, don't get me wrong. It's not applicable to healthcare. We actually use that video in our outpatient business units, in our medical office buildings. It's very applicable there because they can get out, they can evacuate. So there's a lot that you can do and at no cost. We put in a new de-escalation training program. It's a 2-hour and a 4-hour module. We're using CPI. I can't get nurses off the floors for 10 hours. That's just not going to happen. But can I get you out for 2 hours, 1 week, or 1 pay period, and maybe 2 hours the next pay period? Yep, and guess what? That 4 hours is just as good as that 10 hours, in my opinion. Do we have to train everybody? Well, no. You got to train key people. You know, it's mandatory for security, it's mandatory for our ER staff, and then there's other staff throughout that each hospital picks based on their culture, their level of clientele, and the patients. So there's some freedom in there who to pick. We're actually going to have a conference call with one of the COs next week. He's struggling with who to pick, so we're going to help him work through that. It costs $15 for the material, and then we provide the instructors at no cost to the hospitals. So there's, again, cost-benefit analysis, very inexpensive. There's so many things out there you can do that don't cost a lot of money. But I'll submit to you that little bit of investment is going to save you millions of dollars. Like Ryan said, I think $5 million for the shooting at his hospital now. Can anybody here afford to take a $5 million hit on the bottom line in their organization? No way. No way. Again, one of the things I will tell you, it's amazing that from a law enforcement response that he was able to get his hospital back so fast. How many people think in reality you're going to get your hospital back in a couple hours? Ain't going to happen. Ain't going to happen. How long do we keep the streets of Boston closed to do crime scene? About 5 days. Took about 5 days to get that crime scene processed. Again, bombs are a lot more complicated, I get it. But again, depending on the magnitude of your event, could you get it back maybe in a day, maybe 3 days, maybe 4 days? You know, it depends. Again, what I would submit to you also, in your plan, make sure it flows into your mass casualty plan. I'm seeing a lot of places where they have a great act of workplace violence, extreme violence, and then they have incorporated it. Part of our cell, part of our work on our multidisciplinary team, we have an emergency management we call EPOs at every campus. We brought them together and said, okay, what do you guys think about this? How do you incorporate it into an emergency operations plan? And they bought it hook, line, and sinker, and now they've incorporated it into what we call our red book, which is going to go online like everything else. So again, make sure you got everybody involved because you are going to have a mass casualty incident. I will tell you, too, that in my experience, when I've drilled and we've had internal disasters within the building, our staff have a hard time feeling that out because they're working with firemen, paramedics, and it's very confusing about what roles are. So I would suggest to you, if you do an active shooter plan, as Chris did, make sure you do victims and incorporate your hospital teams with your emergency responders because you'll be surprised how much of a disconnect there is there. It really is because, hey, we know how to stop bleeding and do CPR and all that other stuff, but it's totally different. Again, incident command, media, training. This is the individual response. Again, I'm running out of time. There's all types of training programs. We talked about today, if you look down the middle side, get out, hide out, keep out, call out, help out, take out. That was the original. In healthcare, we've developed, and I was part of the team that developed assess, accept, act, and alert. That's what we use in our policy and procedure. Again, as Chris said, when we ran our drills, we actually had a, I don't know, MP9 or some type, and the safety officer was actually firing off rounds during our drill because the officers are using soap guns. They make like a little pop sound. And I got to tell you, it added to the realism because how many people second guessed, was that a gunshot or was that a backfire? How many people actually really heard a gunshot? Very few of you. Go to a gun range, just stand there. You'll know what a gunshot sounds like. Okay? Don't forget to wear hearing protection. All right? But, you know, I mean, until I was a police officer and got on the range as in the Air Force, I didn't know what a gunshot sounded like. If it is a gunshot, if you hear it, it is a gunshot. Assess it, accept it, and then act, and then alert. Got to take care of us and the patients first. And there's a whole process with that. The things that we teach our staff, how many people here think that you can't lock a patient room? By code, we can't, right? You take a Hill-Rom bed, shove it against the door, and lock the brakes. You think anybody's getting through that door? Nope. I'd like to see you try. All right? The other thing, if somebody's shooting at you, as what the executive assistant did for Ryan, what a brilliant person. She locked the door. Solid wood doors. Okay? Now, he said the bullets were flying through the sheetrock, correct? They were down low under desk. So what do you want to do? Put barriers, right? A solid wood door, solid steel door, a fire barrier. You all know where your fire doors are, right? Where do you want to get? Behind a fire door, behind a firewall, behind a solid door, right? Get the patient off the bed. Put him in the bathroom. Can we lock the bathroom door in a patient room? Yes, depending on your location, because you're supposed to keep the key, right? Joint Commission wants us to keep a key close by so we can unlock a patient. I get that, but maybe you need to look at where you put the keys. Maybe you wear the key around your neck. The caregivers wear a key, you know, around their neck on a breakaway. Don't not use a breakaway. But there's things we can do. There's a lot of things we can do to mitigate the loss of life, and that's a whole nother 8 hour. Again, remain at rally points until dismissed. Make sure they're different. Recovery, there's short-term recovery and long-term recovery. Fairchild Air Force Base, you all familiar with that shooting? Again, an individual discharged from the military with mental health issues, waits a long period of time, gets a weapon, goes back to the hospital at Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, and guess where the hospital is? Outside the perimeter of the main base. No security. Walks in, shoots his psychiatrist, psychologist, shoots another individual, goes to her hospital shooting people. A very brave nurse, I'll never forget the story. She's ushering kids into a locked area and comes out, closes the door, and stands there, and here comes Dean Melberg with his weapon, and she says, "Stop, not here." And he just goes the other way. So even a verbal command, because he knew who he wanted to kill, right? Well, we don't know. Ultimately, security forces were notified. A bicycle policeman responds and drops Dean Melberg at about 100 yards with a 9mm with one shot. Pretty impressive. That police officer today has a website, and he talks about how he struggles with that shooting. Totally justified, correct? Saved a lot of lives, right? The thing I want to tell you, though, that part of the hospital where all those shootings happened never reopened. It was totally refitted. It was totally gutted and refitted. CEOs in the room, are you prepared to do that? Are you prepared to do that, to do the healing? Are you prepared to do that? That you may have to do. That's why I talked about, do you want housekeeping cleaning it up? Do you want your employees going back into that area? As Ryan said, there are going to be employees that won't come back to work until they know they're safe. So do we have a lot of work to think this through? Writing a policy is okay, but there's a lot of other stuff that we have to do and be prepared for. Okay. All right, long term. So we talked about damage assessment, impact on business continuity. How many have business continuity plans? That's a new buzzword there. Chris knows what I'm talking about. Business continuity. How do you keep your business open while all this other stuff is going on? All right? If you're a level 1 trauma center, I come in and I shut your ER down, and you're the COO and CFO, what are you going to do? Oh my God, my revenue goes out the door, right? especially if let's say when I was at Liberty, 98% of our revenue came through our ER. Is that a big impact on us financially? Could an active shooter devastate that facility? Absolutely, especially when we're more or less a public health hospital. So think about those things. So make sure you have a business continuity plan. That gets the CFO in, that gets other people in and buy-in. Again, the other thing I would say, if you don't have a contract with a critical incident stress debriefing firm, train your own people. You are going to need those people for an extended period of time. Those of you that have been involved in shootings know what I'm talking about. It's a long time to heal. It takes a long time to figure out that you're okay and that everybody around you is okay. It takes a long time to heal. So you will have critical incident stress debriefers. There's some grant money out there. There's a guy in Maryland who's world-renowned that trains people who come to your site. I can't remember his name. I'm not endorsing anybody, but he did some work for us when I was in Hanover and did a phenomenal job. And what we did was we used that CISD team on a daily routine basis. So if we had a threat, like a SIDS baby, working with the ER staff, those types of things. So you can keep those people's skills pretty fresh. Again, and be very open and honest on your debriefings. I find that when we go to these debriefings, everybody gets insulted. You got to be careful what you say. This is no time to play. And I really applaud Chris on this drill because he did a very good job. And you may think that's a little bit elaborate, but I'm telling you right now, don't run an active shooter drill unless you run it the way Chris showed you. We did the exact same thing with the second drill. The first drill we ran, we used airsoft guns to get people used to that. And then we went with simul ammunition is how you say it. I'm not saying it right. Soap guns and live blank ammunition. Security and safety was utmost for us. We used a closed floor of a hospital at no cost, built it into an ER just by using some of the beds and carts and sheets. You'd be surprised that drill only cost us was manpower time. And we ran 4 drills like Chris did. We ran 4 drills similar to that, and we did it over a 1-day period in a closed section of the hospital. So it was very safe, secure. We only had three doors that we had to cover. So it's very simple. So think about closed floors. Think about how you can change an area into an ER very simply. You'd be surprised what you can do with those stainless steel carts. They make nice walls with sheets on them. So you can do easy stuff like that. Conduct those debriefs. Case study. Let me just tell you about us a little bit. I don't know how to go back. But basically, Memorial Hermann is the largest healthcare system in Southeast Texas. I have over 20 million, I've lost count, square feet of space to protect. I have 175 locations, 13 hospitals. We're expanding 2 hospitals. We're building another hospital, building 5 MOBs. We just built our second freestanding emergency center that's open 24 hours a day with full emergency care, but we also provide radiological, physician, and sports medicine rehab. So it's really community care. If you want to go have an X-ray at 3 o'clock in the morning, you can go have an X-ray at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's blown out. So we actually provide security there 24 hours a day. We're building 4 more of those. So it's big. So when we wrote our plan so that it gave the general structure for both acute care, for ambulatory and non-ambulatory. We didn't want to confuse staff because would you all agree that your staff go from inpatient to outpatient centers? Yeah. They cover, we have our own internal agency called Premier Staffing. So we wanted to make it as easy as we could. And the basic premises. So we used the 4 A's in the acute care setting, and then we used the other video, which is basically hide out, get out, take out, whatever you want to call it. And because in those areas, those people can get out. And we actually teach people things they can do to mitigate the loss of life. We did a gap analysis, formation of a multidisciplinary team. Myself and my counterpart from nursing, Tim Bevilacqua, we sat down and said, look, we got to figure this out. And he helped me because I was new to the organization. I've only been there a couple months, and we handpicked our team throughout the system from nursing education to, I had 2 CNOs on my team. It was a very, very diverse team, and everybody agreed this was a problem. But what that did for me was it helped me sell the program because they went out and started talking to their CEOs and other CNOs because the CNO has, they all meet, right? You have the CNO council, you have the president's council. We even have a CFO council. So again, people started talking about it, so we rolled this out. Vetting. Vetting was probably the most critical thing I did. And when I talk about that, is the policy kind of got bogged down in our risk management department. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, because I'm thinking like what? Former cop, security professional 20 plus years, right? I know what I want to do, and I know the message, and I know the verbiage. All we did was tweak the verbiage, and everybody was happy. They took the word out, fight, and said, take whatever action is necessary to preserve life. Basically, something to that effect. I'm okay with that, because what does that mean? It means fight. And it means it's your decision, correct? And I tell people when I teach, and make sure you understand, if you choose to fight, no rules, and you do whatever it takes to survive. And that means taking out eyeballs, whatever. I don't want to get too graphic. Kicking people where it really hurts, and make sure you kick very hard so that the person doesn't get up, swarming. We can go into it over and over again. And then simultaneously working on standardization of crisis intervention training. We did that. We did a lot of stuff simultaneously. Now, was it a lot of work? Yeah. But let me tell you something. I'm so glad where we're at. Am I happy where we're at today? Yes. Should we be further along? Yes. But in another year, I'll feel much more comfortable with that if we do have an active shooter, that we will respond appropriately. Because there's no wrong or right answer. I hope today, when you leave, that you actually have more questions in your head than answers. My job today was to hopefully get you to think about everything that was discussed today and understand that you have a very complex, very dynamic, very unknown ground to try to make a plan for. And it's going to be very hard for people to understand what you're talking about. I was at the ENA doing an 8-hour active shooter course, and one of the people in the audience said, Joe, I love your definition of active shooter, but if you don't say kill, our nurses won't understand that. I said, well, you can take that definition back and put it in your plan at your hospital. You see how you don't need my permission to change the language. You don't need my permission to change anything I've said today. Go back and do it. Whatever fits for your culture, whatever fits for your organization, do it. Just do it. Stop talking about it. Let's get it done. If you figured out from my profile, I'm a doer. I'm what they call a doer and energizer bunny on the Penn State. Penn State has this thing about your personality profile. So I'm a doer, and I have to get things done. So that's why working with risk management, working with HR, and coming to common ground, we're able to get this out faster than what I thought. 18 months for a large organization as myself to go from 27 policies down to 1 is pretty, I'm very pleased by that. I'm just used to getting things done in 30 days, but that ain't gonna happen anymore, not in a large health system. So again, selling the policy, guys, you got to get out there, go on the road. I spent a lot of time in C-team offices. Get involved in the training. It's a personal investment. I just love getting out there. Anytime I can get out of that office and exercise myself instead of sitting all day, I'll do it. And then find your champions. Some of you have union environments. There's got to be some people in the union that are champions and that can help you sell this program. There's got to be people in HR. There's got to be people in risk. My legal team just went like, wow, let's do this. And then find those people and then get those people to help you to make it happen. I can go on forever. I'm going to stop there because hopefully you have some questions. Hopefully I've answered a lot of your thoughts, or at least at a minimum today, got you to think about something. My job was to try to tie it all together today without being redundant, plus doing it after such a fantastic lunch. Reagan and your team, you've done a great job. This is probably one of the best places I've ever had the opportunity to speak out. And thank you, Boston, for inviting me and being so inviting and welcoming and paying attention. I appreciate it.